They say what goes around comes around. But some people only realize this when it's too late. Once there was a boy called Daniel. He had everything: money, status, and a crowd of friends who admired him. His father was a successful businessman, and Daniel believed that wealth made him superior. He was charming when he wanted to be, but to those who had less, he was ruthless. One of his favorite targets was James, a quiet, hard-working student who never caused trouble. James wasn't poor by choice. He simply didn't have the privileges Daniel did. He wore the same old shoes for years, carried a second-hand backpack, and often ate plain rice at lunch. But no matter how much Daniel mocked him, James never reacted. One day, as James sat alone in the cafeteria eating his usual plain rice, Daniel and his friends walked by. Smirking, Daniel picked up a piece of fried chicken from his own plate and tossed it onto James's tray. "There you go, James. You don't have to beg today," he said loudly. His friends burst into laughter, expecting James to look embarrassed. But James calmly picked up the chicken, wiped it with a napkin, and placed it back on Daniel's plate. "I prefer earning my meals, thanks," he said with a polite smile. For the first time, Daniel had no comeback. The teacher on duty, who had been watching, walked over. "You might have money now, Daniel," she said, "but be careful how you treat people. You never know who will be feeding you tomorrow." Daniel rolled his eyes. "Please, I'll never need anything from someone like him." But fate was listening. Years later, life had taken a sharp turn. Daniel's father's business collapsed after a bad investment. The luxurious cars were gone. The big house was sold. The friends who once laughed at his jokes disappeared. Daniel had to drop out of college and take small jobs just to survive. One evening, as he sat in his tiny rented room scrolling through job listings on his cracked phone, a notification popped up. "You have been shortlisted for an interview." His heart pounded. This was it. A company big enough to change his life. If he got this job, he could finally rebuild everything he had lost. The next morning, he arrived at the company's headquarters in his only decent shirt. He felt out of place among the other well-dressed candidates, but held on to hope. When his name was finally called, he stepped into the interview room and froze. Behind the desk, dressed in a sharp suit, sat James. The same James he had humiliated in school. Except now, James wasn't the quiet student in worn-out shoes. He was the manager of the company. Daniel's stomach twisted. He felt a cold sweat on his back. James looked up from his resume and smiled. "Daniel, long time no see." Daniel forced a shaky smile. "I never thought... you..." James leaned back in his chair, studying him. "I read your application. You're applying for the assistant manager position. Impressive, considering everything." Daniel's heart sank. He knew James remembered everything. He braced himself for the rejection, for James to say, "I prefer earning my opportunities, thanks." But James didn't. He closed the file and said, "I believe everyone deserves a second chance." Daniel stared at him, stunned. You're giving me the job?" James nodded. "Not because I forgot the past, but because I learned from it." Daniel walked out of the office, his mind spinning. He had expected karma to destroy him, but instead, it had taught him the most valuable lesson of all. What goes around truly comes around. Because in the end, it wasn't money that made a man. It was character. And karma never forgets.